All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're wrapping up the final major cell line for your clinical hematology board prep. We are looking at the immune system's absolute powerhouse, its primary cast of characters.
So, as a super quick 20-second recap of the last two explainers, we've already conquered the red blood cell and myeloid lines. You've totally mastered how erythrocytes carry oxygen and how the myeloid granulocytes fight off those nasty bacterial invaders. Which brings us to today's focus, the diverse, highly specialized, and honestly, endlessly fascinating lymphoid lineage.
To keep things moving, here is our roadmap for today. 1. Lymphopoiesis. 2. The normal lymphocyte. 3. Reactive lymphocytes. 4. CD markers and B cells. 5. The plasma cell. And 6. NK and T cells. Let's do it. Section 1. Lymphopoiesis. Let's look at the origin story of these immune cells. Like any good character arc, every lymphocyte starts somewhere. The maturation sequence always flows in a very specific order. It starts with the lymphoblast, matures into a prolymphocyte, and then finally differentiates into a mature lymphocyte, which is eventually going to become either a T cell or a B cell.
Now, what's really interesting here is the strict division of real estate. They actually grow and mature in the primary organs, that's your thymus and bone marrow. But once they're matured, they don't just hang around there. They migrate out to the secondary organs, like the lymph nodes, spleen, tonsils, and Peyer's patches in your gut. These secondary sites are basically the networking hubs where they communicate and actually mount their immune responses. So as a clinical tech, this tells you exactly where the microscopic battle is happening when a patient presents with swollen lymph nodes.
Section 2. The normal lymphocyte. Basically what they look like in their standard resting state.
You know, you really have to know normal before you can spot abnormal. When you're scanning a peripheral blood smear, look for a small cell about 7 to 10 micrometers. You want to see that classic 4:1 N to C ratio, meaning the nucleus is huge, taking up almost the whole cell. That nucleus should be non-lobulated with clumped chromatin, surrounded by a thin rim of light sky blue, usually agranular cytoplasm. Now keep in mind, some larger lymphs do exist, and those tend to get pushed to the very periphery of your slide. Sometimes they even show a few purplish-red azurophilic granules. As for the numbers, children naturally run higher, roughly 25 to 55%, compared to adults who sit at about 20 to 44%. Oh, and incredibly, these resting normal cells, they can literally live for years.
Section 3. Reactive lymphocytes, historically known as Turk or Downey cells. So what actually happens when our normal everyday lymphocyte encounters viruses like Epstein-Barr, hepatitis, CMV, or toxoplasmosis? Well, they go to war. They transform into these large agranular reactive lymphocytes. And as you can see perfectly here, their abundant light blue cytoplasm just gets completely squished and indented by the surrounding red blood cells. We call this the classic Crayola outline. It's like the red blood cells are pressing into this soft cytoplasm, giving it a stretched, flared, irregular border. For your board exams, here is an absolutely crucial distinction to remember: the rule of contrast. When you look at a slide full of reactive cells, they're shapeshifters. They have highly variable morphology. Some are massive, some are stretched, some are slightly darker. They are reacting in their own chaotic way. In stark contrast, malignant or atypical populations, like in leukemia, look monotonously uniform. If they all look exactly the same, you should be highly suspicious. On to Section 4, CD markers and B cells, our humoral immunity squad. Because so many of these cells look practically identical under the microscope, we need a reliable way to check their name tags, so to speak. We identify these invisible tags using flow cytometry to read their CD markers. CD just stands for cluster designation, which is a nomenclature system that was formalized by the World Health Organization back in 1989. Representing our humoral immunity squad, we have the B cells. They wear the CD19, CD20, and CD21 name tags and make up about 10 to 20% of circulating lymphocytes. Now, after birth, they mature in the bone marrow, but they don't become fully immunocompetent until they reach that secondary lymphoid tissue. When they make contact with an antigen, because they are totally dependent on antigenic stimulation, they transform into a reactive lymphocytes and then an immunoblast. From there, it's a fork in the road. They either become a memory B cell that lives for months or even years to give a swifter response later, or they become an end-stage plasma cell, providing humoral immunity by pumping out antibodies. Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, the plasma cell. You will absolutely see this on an exam, for sure. The plasma cell is the end stage of a B cell. They don't divide, and they actually die within days. Look for a cell that's 10 to 20 micrometers with a totally eccentric nucleus, meaning it's pushed entirely to one side. The nucleus has very coarse clumped chromatin. Surrounding it is this rich, deep blue, cornflower-colored cytoplasm. And check out that distinct pale zone right next to the nucleus. That's the Hoff area. It's a massive perinuclear Golgi zone working in overdrive to package antibodies. You usually won't see these in circulating blood. They dominate in the lymph nodes and make up less than 4% of nucleated marrow cells. In an even more extreme state, when these plasma cells become totally packed with immunoglobulin-filled vacuoles, they look like they're full of giant bubbles. We refer to those specific inclusions as Russell bodies. It is quite literally a plasma cell bursting with its own antibodies. Finally, Section 6, NK and T cells, are directors of cellular immunity. Let's talk about natural killer cells first, also known as large granular lymphocytes. Making up less than 20% of the lymphocyte population, these guys look completely different from ordinary small lymphs. They are large, they have a low N-to-C ratio, and they feature prominent large granules in a pale blue cytoplasm. They completely lack B and T markers. Instead, they wear CD16 and CD56 name tags. Their job? They relentlessly monitor for cell surface alterations. When activated by IL-2 for nonspecific cytotoxicity, they ruthlessly destroy tumor cells and virus-infected cells. And they can even act as antibody-dependent cytotoxic cells, attacking antigens that have IgG attached to them.
Meanwhile, T cells absolutely dominate the circulation, making up 60 to 80% of your circulating lymphocytes. Like the name implies, they differentiate in the thymus. Their CD markers are a broader set: CD2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 56. What's wild is that these markers can actually appear, disappear, and reappear throughout their development. T cells are the core of your cellular immunity. They get their antigenic intelligence from monocytes, and then they direct massive attacks against viral and fungal organisms, lyse neoplastic cells, and are the primary culprits in graft rejection. They also regulate the humoral response by helping B cells, churning out end products like cytokines, lymphokines, and interleukins.
But T cells aren't just a monolith. They're divided into highly specialized subsets. Let's lock in this specific board prep mnemonic right now. CD4 is your T helper cell. It promotes B cell activation, is calculable from CD3 without flow cytometry, and sadly is the primary target for HIV. On the flip side, CD8 is your T suppressor and cytotoxic squad, which suppresses B cell activation and kills during viral infections or organ rejections. We also have T regulatory cells carrying both CD4 and CD25 to suppress responses to self or harmless antigens. And finally, those long-lived T memory cells that just lie dormant until reinfection triggers a swift, rapid response. Because these helper and suppressor roles are basically complete opposites, balance is literally everything. In healthy people, this exact ratio of CD4 to CD8 cells, a 2-to-1 ratio, must be maintained. Because HIV specifically targets CD4 cells, this 2-to-1 ratio is explicitly used to monitor the disease progression. If that ratio starts to flip, the immune system is in serious trouble. Think about it. Every time you casually recover from a viral infection, it's because this precise 2-to-1 ratio of immune helpers to assassins just executed a flawless microscopic war on your behalf. And that wraps up part 1 of this explainer. We've covered the lymphoid lineage, pinning down the origins and the vital distinctions between B cells, T cells, and NK cells. But what happens when the rest of our white blood cells go completely rogue? Join us in part 2, where we'll conquer reactive neutrophil changes, WBC disorders, absolute versus relative counts, smear interpretation, and the ultimate board prep buzzword capstone. So I leave you with this. If a single CD marker flipping can entirely derail your body's defenses, what other microscopic tipping points are hiding in a routine blood smear? See you in part 2 to find out.